Hey, kia ora guys. Before we get started, I wanted to do a couple of quick shout outs. One is to Pedro Bernardi Sensei of Dirubukan Dojo, who actually made the physical, albeit virtual, introduction to McGale Sensei. So thank you, Sensei, so much. Also, I want to thank John Jackson, whose wonderful photos I'm using as part of this presentation today. Thank you, sir, for allowing me to use these photos. And enjoy, and we'll catch up with you soon. Kia ora koutou. Welcome to the Invisible Sensei podcast. I am so happy that you could make it today because this is a podcast I've been wanting to do for a while. There are many people that I've come into contact through the martial arts, through karate especially, and there are going to be people that I really want to talk to, and you're going to get to meet some of my friends. Someone that I just want to start by saying a big thank you to Josh Simmers Sensei of the Okinawan and Karate podcast. I was trolling through the internet, YouTube, as a lot of us do, before we heard about wonderful Bujin TV. Yes, that is a plug. And I was looking for something early morning. I train early morning. And I wanted something that kind of inspired me, got me going. And I was in the dojo and I was feeling a little bit listless. And I came across Josh Simmers' excellent podcast, the Okinawan Karate podcast. And he was talking to this gentleman, Sensei Pat McGale. Now, I kind of clicked on it and sort of let it go. And I was going, this guy, he sounds just like one of the uncles. He sounds like one of my uncles, you know, just kind of kicking back and sort of talking about karate. And as I listened to the conversation, I realized that what I was getting was an insight into not only karate, but the culture that it comes from. Training with people I regard as masters of karate came very late in my karate career, whereas Sensei McGale, born and raised on Okinawa, being both Okinawan and American, having an insight into the language and the culture that a lot of us don't have. So he started with a master. So, I mean, you know, the road's just got to only slant down after you started at the real top. The rest of us are trying to get there. So, Sensei, thank you so much for being here, for taking time to be a part of this tiny podcast. I am so very, very honored to have you here. And yeah, thank you for taking the time.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite and your interest. I am happy to be here and to share however I can.
So, Sensei, I guess for me, what I'd like to do is start with this question, if we may, just jumping straight into it.
Sure thing.
So, but before we get the questions, I also want to say this. I sent Sensei these questions, which I don't usually do because I like people to be off the cuff, but I thought, no, I'm not arguing with him. I've seen what he can do. So I sent him some questions and he came back with these amazing answers. So I'm going to stick with that format, Sensei. My first question is, Sensei, as a literal lifelong karateka who has seen the art spread from Okinawa to the rest of the world and gain Olympic inclusion, where would you say karate sits at the moment?
Well, I think karate being included into the Olympics and various games, people will look at it as another opportunity to extend their display or competition if that's the arena that they're in. But in how it relates to traditional karate, people are going to be split. So I believe, it's just my opinion, but I believe in Okinawa, people are going to be split. I think it is going to promote Okinawa karate, and that's a good thing. But it's going to promote Okinawa karate as a sport. It's going to promote Okinawa karate as a game. Again, I'm not trying to shed any negative light on it. It's just that it's very different. It's very different because the minute you get something involving in a game or in a sport, there are rules. And a traditional Okinawan karate, there aren't what you call rules. I mean, it's just if you're doing kumite, you're basically are, compassionate to each other. You're, dojo, senpais or, you know, classmates, and you're going to spar and you're going to hold punches, but you're not there to kill, right? And so even that, has a frame of regulations. However, in kumite, you can also control the depth of your punch, control the depth of your techniques, and things of that nature. So, I think there are rules in competition kumite, and then there is self-defense. Two completely different things. And so, I think you have to look at it from a philosophical aspect. I would say, there is, on one side you have a path with an end, be that a trophy or a goal, to reach, and then the other path, it just is. It's perpetual. It just continues. The goal is to keep going. It's not, there's no specific mountain peak or anything, And so that's where I feel is quite different.
It's interesting you say that too, because I just want to get you to elaborate, Sensei. With Okinawan karate, I was listening to another podcast this morning, and these particular Shotokan practitioners, I know, of course, Shotokan is a Japanese style of karate, and they were talking about Okinawan karate being too mired in tradition, to be of practical value. What kind of response do you have to people? I mean, I've heard that before, where people who have a very much sport-orientated take on things have a very interesting take on Okinawan karate. They sort of see it as, well, they don't spend their time drilling up and down the dojo, or that's not all they do. It seems to have a very different way of doing it. So what's your response to people who say things like that, Sensei?
I think, I don't want to, just say it's Shotokan or just Japanese karate. It's really the mindset of what you think karate is. Now, we can all be very different. Every karateka in the world can be all very different in our perception of what karate is to us as an individual. But it really gets down to how, for example, if you say a kata, right? In order to improve a kata, one must repeat the kata, right? And then in one way of thinking for competition, it's about how do you make it snappy? How can I punch stronger? How can I display it better so it looks crisp? What looks better, right? Whereas, you get stuck in some bar fight down the alley. Who cares what looks better? Did you get the job done, right? That's what it comes down to. So again, the goal is very different. And, the conditioning to get to your perceived goal, to be better, right? Like I've always told my students, I said, we don't have, at our dojo, we don't have this mindset of black belt training. I mean, really, what the hell is that? Oh, sorry. But, really, what is that? What is black belt training, What if you didn't have a belt? Your pants just fall off. That's all, right? And so you basically are training at the highest level as you can all the time from day one. So it's your sensei, that's going to be either the one that takes you to the next level, or it's your sensei that makes you misunderstand or does something wrong. It's usually the sensei's fault, right? To give the perception incorrectly to the students. But many dojos, they'll do, let's say 100 push-ups or 1,000 punches, and I say, okay, but That's great physically. Does that give you mental grit? Maybe. Yeah, probably mental grit just to, make sure you can drive and take yourself over that. But in the end, the practice of those maybe last 800 punches are those perfect punches, right? And, that one can say, oh, always make your punches perfect. Okay, great. But we are human beings. And after every exerted effort, we're going to tire or lose some energy or lose some strength and so forth, right? And so it has to be understood that, our minds and our bodies adapt to what we do most. So if you do 800 punches incorrectly and you've done that the most, well, that's what you're going to remember and adapt to, you know. So I always am very strict about how many punches or how many times we do something to where it becomes ineffective or inefficient, like doing push-ups. Well, if you're going to do 100 push-ups, that's a waste of time. Why don't you do 20 push-ups that are more difficult instead of just doing regular push-ups? You see what I mean? So one has to be able to use their time more efficiently and approach some type of training to reach an individual's goal more effectively, more efficiently.
Sensei, do you think that, it's interesting, one of the rationales I've heard for that type of training is that, people are trying to get to a point where they're so tired the only thing they have left is good technique, which is an interesting thing to me because I suppose why not just start out with having good technique?
Exactly. Right. And that's why, I don't, a lot of people, they'll join a dojo and they'll be learning the hand shodan or the first, kata the very first day they walk in. Why? They don't know how to stand yet. Right? Like, especially with Kobudo, I hear people learning the first bow kata. So why? They don't even know how to hold the bow yet. My students, trained students are not allowed to start Kobudo until I let them in, until I, see their basics and their foundations well enough to hold the bow,
Right.
or to do something beyond that. And then even at that, they're not taught the first kata, unless they've been in class for 2 weeks to a month, because they're training on how to manipulate the bow.
I guess for me, Sensei, when you talk about this, and a follow-up question to that is sort of as an Uchinanchu who straddles two cultures, really, that of American, Okinawan and American Islands, and growing up speaking Japanese and being exposed to Hogan. Do you feel these factors gave you a unique experience in your own training of karate?
Yes. Being bilingual, actually Japanese is my first language, because where I live, we lived out in a Okinawan community and all my friends were Okinawan. However, all my education was through, American or English speaking schools. But the difference is that, if you do not speak the language and you're trying to communicate with someone, as if you were to go to some other foreign country, where you don't really have a sense or a grasp of the language. It's a bunch of hand gestures and nods and, smiles and things like that to say, to hear back confirmation just by a sensei saying, yes, again, hi, or a smile. That didn't tell you anything other than they're just telling you to do it again, So with the difference in that is that I spoke the same language that my sensei, Seikichi Odo, was my first karate sensei. And we actually talked, we actually communicated, we conversed, we dialogued, we, had a conversation, not, grunts and nods and smiles and gestures,
Well, it's interesting.
So,
it's actually interesting you say that too, Sensei, because I know that, and you can tell me what your thoughts are, just expanding on that, I guess. There's a lot of people who have trained in Okinawa who don't speak Japanese and clearly don't speak kind of comments they have is like, oh, we spoke the language of karate, I didn't speak any Japanese and he didn't speak any English, and he was just, I just knew when things were kind of right and wrong. What's your response when you hear those kind of stories, Sensei?